So you might just take Orania for granted, that it's this little hub that was built and bought and purchased by Afrikaners and built into a lovely, beautiful little community. But this might be the downfall of our state and the unity of our country. So Julius Malema and the EFF are planning a march on the 22nd of April to ensure the eradication of the white-only Orania. This just so happens to coincide with new legislation that was passed by the police minister just yesterday, restricting security firms from protecting the people of South Africa. Oh yeah, and part of this legislation also says that self-defense is not a valid reason to own a firearm. So interesting times ahead. Do me a favor before we get into this. I've been missing for a few days. As you know, I'm actually in full-time construction work and I gotta do this in my spare time. If you could subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate that. If you want to help me out by buying a coffee, jumping over onto the Patreon or becoming a member, that would be awesome too. That way I might be able to get some more frequent uploads for you. Cheers. So yesterday was Liberation Day. Trump started to slam people with tariffs across the board. Ireland got hit with a 20% tariff. South Africa got hit with a 30% tariff.
South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it.
Very interesting that both governments have spent the last couple of months disparaging and talking shit at Donald Trump and expected something of a different outcome. The Irish government and their leaders have actually spent the last 4 years openly calling him names. Not who he was going to appoint to his administration, nothing about his foreign policy or his home policy. They were actually personally calling him names. So what do you expect, you absolute losers, when you get hit like this? But apparently there's going to be some discussion and negotiation and everything's going to be sorted out by our powerful and stoic leaders. Yeah, so the ANC moves to destroy South Africa's private security industry. New legislation from the police minister seeks to further restrict security firms, limiting access to handcuffs, tasers, firearms in churches, malls and other public spaces. The same criminal, illegitimate regime that crippled the police force is now determined to disarm those who uphold the law. Is this part of a larger, more sinister agenda? Yeah. It's 100% part of a larger, more sinister agenda, and it plays into exactly what the EFF are planning with their march to eradicate Orania. The legislation on this bill is deep and dense, and it goes into a lot of jargon. But at the end of the day, basically what it means is, because the police force are incapable of doing their actual job, now private security firms, or even just farmers that are trying to protect their land, will have massive punitive measures come upon them, which will 100% add more fear and danger to the everyday Afrikaners or white people of South Africa. Yesterday was a huge day in terms of movers and shakers within the South African government. But when you think about elected officials like Julius Malema singing the song, calling for harm to be put towards the white people of South Africa, and how it's covered up by the mainstream media, you see posts like this going out. You know, Orania must fall. Northern Cape march to Orania to demand a review of the existence. Like... how much more blatant can you get? Came across this clip from Juice Stratum talking about how after the Expropriation Without Compensation Act came into play and Trump responded, how this affected Orania. And it was actually very interesting and very telling to see how the mainstream pundit here was actually pushing back and trying to debunk Juiced during this interview.
But would you agree that this, for me, at least on my end, sounds like a mischaracterization? Hateful rhetoric and government actions fueling disproportionate violence against the racially disfavored landowners. Do you think or believe that Afrikaners are facing disproportionate violence?
Before we hear the answer there, he disagrees with it wholeheartedly, that Donald Trump has said that there was disproportionate violence aimed towards the white farmers of South Africa because of the singing of songs by elected officials. So he doesn't believe it and he wants proof. This is where the waters start getting muddied and we start getting into the weeds, where you're looking for proof. Again, with every government, this is the same tactic. You know, pedantic nuances. Have a look around on social media, mate. Have a look around.
I think the people of South Africa are facing violence in general.
So whether you're Afrikaner or not,
that is a definite fact. There's no doubt about it. However, what
Did you see, like, he was literally jumping out of his seat to get in there and say, it doesn't matter that you're Afrikaners, it's other people as well, right? There's black people being harmed as well, of course. With the crime rate being so high in South Africa and the white people being the minority, of course other people, as in black people, your people, are going to be affected as well. Like, calm down, bro.
What we do not see in regards to other groups who are also suffering is the institutionalized call for violence. We see people in government, whether that be Andile or Julius Malema, that fuels this racist rhetoric, and people can say, well, they are fringe figures. The fact is they are in government. Those are people duly elected into government, where Afrikaners have a very, very small voice, and things are being voiced on an institutional level through government institutions saying, kill these people. Yeah. Now, some may make that off as a struggle song, as a historical context, but the brutal reality is that farm murders and the torture that goes with that doesn't agree with the fact that that's only rhetoric or only history. It is quite clear that the people in government singing these hateful songs and making these statements is to a great concern of Afrikaners. So definitely, on an institutional level, there is a discrepancy. There is something else. There is something that might be called revenge killings or something in that matter. And we want to shift that away from that towards recognition of Afrikaners, towards recognition of Orania.
Yeah, but just where is that happening? Where have you heard of people killing Afrikaners because of what Julius Malema said? This matter was also dealt with in court, and there was no concrete evidence that was presented in court, and that's the reason why the court said singing the song, killing the boer, kill the farmer, should be considered as this is a struggle song and not necessarily incitement to violence. Nothing
new in terms of the rhetoric here. What concrete evidence have you seen? That's why our court system has adjudicated to the fact that this isn't an incitement to violence. You think that we trust your court system, your government system, or this mainstream legacy media system that you've got going on here? The audacity of these people to just continuously lie and gaslight and propagate people is just gross. It's absolutely gross.
I don't want to dwell too much on this, but I want to answer you. What must Afrikaners think when at a farm murder there is messages written on the walls with blood? What must Afrikaners think when farm murders are disproportionately violent? And that has been proven time and again.
Yeah, but both you and I just agreed now that it's not true that Afrikaners are facing disproportionate violence in comparison to other groups in the country. Whether you're Afrikaner... Sorry,
can I have the opportunity?
Okay.
What I said is that all people in South Africa are facing the violence that is the direct effect of the inability to manage South Africa from a central position. That is why we are pro-decentralization.
The dude was losing his mind there. He was absolutely about to have an aneurysm because he just wanted it to be said that he pushed back. You know that there was someone talking in his ear, or whether it was just a built-in ability to be that retarded. But again, it was answered brilliantly in terms of that white South Africans, of course, are not the only victims of violence in South Africa. That's mentally ill to even say that. But in terms of being a minority and having a disproportionate amount of incitement put towards you from sitting government officials, yes, there's an imbalance there. Because yes, there is no white member of South Africa's government standing in front of 80,000 people calling for harm towards the black population. Of course, that's not a thing, and it would never be a thing. So it was answered brilliantly, but it was interesting just to see these people squirm in their chairs and do what they do. And that is lie. The EFF is a mentally ill leftist political party in South Africa, led by Julius Malema, who has long been critical of Orania, viewing it as a symbol of racial exclusion and a remnant of apartheid. Always comes back to the remnants of apartheid. The same way over in the United States of America, it always comes back to the slave trade, and the same way here in Ireland, oh wait, no, that was us. We were the slaves for hundreds of years. But our kids are also being taught that we're oppressors and colonizers. So that's interesting as well. Being Afrikaner, fluent in Afrikaans, and aligned with community values result in an all-white population.
Orania we might take it for granted, only to realize later that they will be the one that will destroy the unity of this country. And for that matter, we need to engage them to stop their nonsense that the reason they have Orania is for them to practice their culture and so forth. Why are they part of this legislature? Why are they part of councils? Why are they doing business with black people and say to us that they can't stay with us in their neighborhood?
So you might just take Orania for granted, that it's this little hub that was built and bought and purchased by Afrikaners and built into a lovely, beautiful little community. But this might be the downfall of our state and the unity of our country. And he also wants the ridiculousness to stop in terms of procuring your own land and being with your own people. I think the initiative of creating towns like Orania are beyond important to preserve our culture going forward. They're an absolute essential and a must. And when you see obviously radical left-leaning political movements like the EFF come after it and say that it needs to be eradicated, you expect that. It's disgusting, and to see what's going to happen and transpire is going to be very interesting. But it is disgusting. But when you see your own people going against what you're trying to do in terms of preservation of culture, that's worse. That's worse for me. You had the Return to the Land movement over in the Ozarks doing absolutely fantastic work. And I know people here in Ireland and in the UK that are doing exactly the same sort of initiative in terms of the Woodlander initiative, bringing people together to preserve our culture. Absolutely fantastic stuff. When you have some of the most prominent people in the conservative movement and in the right-wing movement absolutely shitting on the idea of preserving culture and gathering your people together and building from the grassroots out, that's even more infuriating.
And white people are like, what if we built a general store? What if we built a general store and what if we built a church brick by brick, a beautiful stone building? What if we became farmers and we had a general store and we had a main street? And then white people are like, what if we had a town? What if we had a town of only white people? What if we had a town of just white people and we may have to sweep our own streets, we may have to grow our own food, but it's only gonna be us white people, and eventually we gonna have our own country.
Absolutely infuriating hearing this type of stuff from someone with such a large voice, and then not more than like 3 days later totally contradicting himself with stuff like this.
And I will tell you this as plainly as possible. I don't want to live around black people. I just don't. It would be irresponsible if I had a wife and kids to live near black people. It just would be.
And obviously he's talking about an assault that took place on another white teenager yesterday who had his life viciously ended for absolutely no reason in school, and this is the problem. But in terms of huge content creators being contradictory, being two-faced, and just shitting on people for clicks and views and not actually thinking about the preservation of us as a people, I hate that, and the voice should be used a lot better. That's what I have for you. Let me know your thoughts down below. Maybe hit like and subscribe if any of it made sense. And as I said earlier, if you can help support the channel, I'd greatly appreciate that as well. Cheers.